All right. I want to try to make a couple quick points about where I feel like we are at this current time with the virus, with where I am with the virus, and also some important points as I see them as to how we're going to be able to get through this as a nation and really as a human race. So first I want to start off, I want to read an email that I wrote. It's kind of lengthy, but I want to read it anyways. So this is an email I've been dialoguing back and forth about trying to give evidence that this virus was engineered in a Chinese lab. Now, I don't have time to go through all the details. I've been going non-stop collecting articles and doing research, and so I feel very confident about what I've come across. It's all public. Most of them are from they're all from major sources, NIH sources, nature.com, or Science magazine or whatever. Anyway, so the email says a couple quick points about the links I included, and I included 4 links in this email. The first is just a resend of the actual UNC research. So in 2015, quick review, UNC was doing bat coronavirus research. They were making hybrid viruses, chimeric viruses, a merging of 2 different viruses together, and they were experimenting on the transmissibility of these viruses within human cells. They were using human lung cells. The second is a resend of the articles that discussed the opposition the research began facing from some in the scientific community. The third is the same, but it clearly illustrates that UNC was successful in creating a hybrid virus. And that's clearly stated in the research. It wasn't just like these articles critical of the research were pointing this out. The research itself was explaining how it did this. So this was not like, it's not debated that that's what they were doing. Was successful in creating a hybrid virus that could transmit within human cells. The 4th article was written recently by researchers that have been heavily involved with analyzing other dangerous viral outbreaks in the US, such as Zika and Ebola. And I included a note here that says there is potential very important information that needs to be known about these researchers and their connection to the Gates Foundation. And I said more on that later. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but it's important. And I haven't even fully gone down it yet. I just began. And what that is these 3 of the 4 researchers that did this research that I just mentioned. It's called, the study's called The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2. And what they've done in the last, I guess, month or two, this was published March 17th, 2020 in Nature Medicine. And so what they did was they looked at the genomic sequencing, or at least whichever version they got, because the virus is mutated, and they basically broke down the fact that they were analyzing what they found, but their ultimate conclusion was that it was possible for this virus to have emerged in a lab. They didn't think that was likely, and they thought that, it was, I think some of the other theories that it was possible that it could have gotten transmitted directly from the bat, or a bat, or whatever the host was, to the human population, but that but it would have taken some time to mutate, as it was traveling through the human population before, people began getting sick, I think was what I understood them saying. So there were a few different theories that they gave, but basically they broke down the fact that they did not think it was plausible to say that it happened in a lab, although they did say that it was possible, right? And the thing about, so these people are also, I realized that their articles are reviewed by this, what's it called? By this nonprofit organization called, sorry. Damn it, where is it? Scripps, okay? This nonprofit organization called Scripps University or Scripps Education or something like that. The reason that's important is, there's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that they've received probably close to $175 million in funding from the Gates Foundation since 2013. I know that on its own doesn't prove anything, but like I said, I'm just getting into it. The other thing is so they reviewed these people are also a part of this Christian Anderson, who was one of the 4 researchers involved in this study. These people were also involved in doing analysis of Zika and Ebola during those outbreaks that happened in the United States, even though they were very small and limited. The point is they're reviewed by this Scripps Education, among other groups. One is the U.S. Army Medicine or something like that, and these people are a part of that Scripps. So it's like I don't fully understand yet, but it's like they're being reviewed by this group, but they're a part of the group, right? Like it always seems to happen that way. The other fact is they, like I said, they're funded heavily by the Gates Foundation. They received millions of dollars worth of funding, I believe, even this year. I've got that stuff printed out in there. And there, we'll have to get all into that another time. But why Gates and the Gates Foundation is so significant, because it is. It's at the center of all of this. So anyway, let me finish the email. And I say that basically, the 4th link explains the possibility of emergence of the virus in a lab, but denies the plausibility or likelihood of the theory, what I just explained. It does clearly explain how this could happen, and it makes subtle points admitting that their research is inconclusive due to the mutability, the mutability of the virus and the limited access to broad data based on the diversity of the genomic sequencing. So, like, the way I understand it is, these scientists they received, for example, the genomic sequencing from China initially. And the problem with that is number one, my question is how do we even know that China gave us the correct genomic sequence? And the second thing is because of the fact that this virus is constantly mutating, it's difficult to trace back its origins, but it's also, these scientists are not all looking at the exact same strand of the virus. Now, they found similarities and consistencies through the ones that they've been studying. I've even read that in this article here. But the point is it's not, they admit that they don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, obviously. And so that is important to understand, because when they make claims like it didn't emerge from the lab, these are not conclusive. Like, it's not absolutely it did not. It's we don't think it did. And again, we're only getting a very limited perspective from these researchers that, again, are heavily funded by the Gates Foundation, for example, like this one. So I said the key fact to recognize is to not be naive to that an engineered bat coronavirus has already been created at least 5 years ago at UNC. The PRC is not afforded the same rights of innocence until proven guilty as we give our citizens. When you consider the extensive knowledge we have of this type of coronavirus research, the Wuhan Institute of Virology researchers that have been directly participating in this research with the United States and other nations, the coincidental timing of the emergence of the virus for many reasons, that's also extremely important, and the hysterical response from the PRC initially. The rational conclusion must be that the PRC, until the PRC proves the virus was not engineered in a lab or even accidentally emerged in a lab, which I see as one and the same, then they're guilty. So, I go on to make a couple, I included a clip of one of these articles, but I won't get into it, just discussing about, one of the scientists that was critical back in 2015, discussing, how their virus grows remarkably well in human cells, that if the virus escaped, nobody could predict the trajectory, and weighing the risk benefit of doing this type of research. So anyway, that's that about the virus. But what I want to say about the way that we are dealing with the authorities in our country right now and how they're dealing with us. We are witnessing how submissive the human population is around the world. Because you can't really just say it's an American thing or whatever, but it's especially bad, in my opinion, in our country, because we're supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a country that values individual liberties and freedoms and independent thought and all kinds of things, which have all been thrown out the window overnight. And what I'm getting at with all of this research is that when we sit here and we talk about scientific consensus, we all throw that around. The media throws it around, we throw it around, we accept it when they say scientific consensus. But the more you start to research this, you realize that the scientific consensus, number one, is not a consensus at all. But number two, the scientific consensus usually is made up of a very small group of scientists that are very heavily funded by a very small group of billionaires or nations. So that's the important thing that people are absolutely missing in this whole coronavirus outbreak. And the fact that we have given Fauci a mouthpiece that has basically made him like a dictator over the world, but over our country. The other thing is the World Health Organization. We bow down to what the World Health Organization says. It's coming out, partially thanks to Donald Trump, how the World Health Organization is potentially co-conspirators with China in the cover-up of their not letting out the real facts of the virus early on, or at least they turned a blind eye, which basically is the same thing in my view. So that's coming out. And again, when you go look on the Gates Foundation page and you look at how much money they've given to the World Health Organization, it's upwards of like $40 million a year in the last 2 years. So I don't know how that, compares to where they get the rest of their money, but $40 million worth of grants is considerable, right? So these are the important facts that we're not, that have not been fully disclosed to us. And in order to figure these things out, you have to dig and spend hours and hours of research. And if the media is not doing that, if our congressmen and women are not doing that, then how are we ever going to be aware of this information if we don't do it ourselves? Most Americans don't have time. Most Americans don't realize that there's any need to do this kind of research. So what I'm saying is we get the wool pulled over our eyes very easily, and we have become incredibly complacent and incredibly compliant to the medical authorities and the authorities in general that are telling us how there's a consensus on a number of topics. This translates over to so many different issues. Global warming is one of them, but the reality is until we start becoming adept to learning how much we're being deceived, then we're not going, that may not have been the right word, but we're not going to ever be able to understand what's really going on in the world and how the world really works. That's all for now.